Welcome to the Mucked Up My Self-Care podcast.
I'm Jill from New York.
And I'm Linda from Tasmania.
We are two moms from opposite sides of the world who are living, demonstrating, and helping moms across the world build their self-care asset bank.
Ready to dive in? Messy, interrupted, imperfect, and most of all mucked up. Let's get going.
Right.
Hello. I feel like we haven't talked for ages. Why is that? Time is just evaporating.
It is. I'm very excited to get here tonight, though.
Yeah, me too. It's one of the joys of my week.
Yeah.
Why don't you start us off, highs and lows?
Yeah. Let's see. Highs and lows. I'm gonna start with my low. I had a really, really tough week hormonally going through this cycle of it started like PMS symptoms started a week and a half early or than what was supposed to be on my schedule, which then ended up being forcing everything to come a week early. And I wasn't expecting it. So it was very rough cycle this time around. I've been keeping track, and it's like we were good for a few cycles and it was predictable. And then all of a sudden this one out of nowhere was just monstrous.
Bam.
Yeah. So now I have to keep note and then like try and look back now to see when was the last monstrous one and compare those. So I have my work cut out for me in analyzing my stuff, but it helps me prepare for the next round. So I love doing that and knowing, so I can be a little bit more predictable, my attitude wise. Let's see. Hi. You would think this is the easy one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what? Right before coming on here, Linda, it wasn't a rage clean. It was a taking advantage of an empty house, hyper focus, organize the kids' room. Like,
yep. Mm-hmm.
Declan was dropped off at my parents' camping for the night, and I came home and music went
just
on.
Got stuck in.
Let's do it.
I love those moments, and you hadn't overthought it and overanalyzed it like you are with your period right now.
Fluttered from one friend to the next. So I was like, okay, this needs to be switched over here, and it was like so great. I was so happy. I was like, this is self-care when it's not manic.
Yeah, we just pulled all the stuff out from under the couch, and it's like this huge pile now in the lounge room. There you go. That's a bit of a low. It's like there's clean washing. Well, once was clean washing and toys and apple cores, and just like, oh my gosh, it's not a huge couch. It's only a smallish 2-seater couch, and somehow it's got all the things. And I think I remember Quinn playing a game the other day about rabbits and burrows and holes, and so I think he was putting all of these things
under the couch. They were going into the burrow.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, that's so creative, but how can we do this differently?
Right.
And hi, getting back into a bit more movement this week. Riding my bike. I walked to school with the kids this morning, which the dog always enjoys, and just I found a free Apple Watch, which apparently wasn't syncing or pairing. I haven't had any problems with it so far, so it keeps me on track a bit more because it's in my face in front of me. This is how many hours you've slept or not slept, or this is your heart rate, and this is your steps for the day, and all those things. So yeah, it's really important to get moving a little bit more. It helps. It's self-care at its finest for me, and I know the days that I don't do as much of that, definitely feel a lot more stuck, and definitely think, yeah, it's an important part of what I need to do right now. Yep. And I'm also wondering if we're going a little bit in sync, because I've also had had my red patch this week.
It's so funny. I have another friend who's like, I think we're getting in sync. I'm like, I barely see you, but okay.
Yeah.
But one interesting thing is that I've learned, and it's not like, I don't know, it's proven, it's not proven. It's not proven, it's not proven, whatever, how the menstrual cycle syncs up with the new moon phases. And that's just what happens to also have happened on the same day that I started it. So it's like, oh, okay, maybe that's why things were a little bit rougher for my go around, because I finally synced up with that or something, or all of us are syncing up. Maybe it's a Mercury retrograde for women right now kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Mine used to be very much in line with the moon. I used to know that if there's a new moon, that would be the time of the month, and then pregnancy and not having it for months and that sort of thing. It's changed now, but I wonder if it will sort of sync back up again.
Yeah.
As well, because
very interesting when I learned about that. And that was like at the beginning of my involvement with like getting so understanding of my cycle. And I learned that first. And that kind of really helped understand the PMS week and timing that out with the hormones, especially with the rage postpartum.
Yep.
And we started seeing the ebb and flow of when that would come, and noticing it was the week before. And that's that part of the cycle of understanding that is what cleared that up for us, and figuring out how my hormones would start really messing around based on that cycle. So interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating, because we know estrogen in particular. So that's the hormone that influences things like dopamine and serotonin and all of those other signals that are constantly sent to our brain, and you can really experience a lot of that mental and emotional load if you've got those estrogen levels which are dipping and flowing. And it's like a flip-flop of emotion sometimes, which is closely, I'm sure, aligned with the hormone surges, especially during pregnancy and postpartum and while breastfeeding, or like there's so many factors of that as well. And I've been editing and doing the production for a few of the midlife podcasts at the moment. So I've been able to learn a bit more about estrogen and all those things in menopause and perimenopause, and how long we go through perimenopause sometimes, and the new research and everything else that's coming into that now, because it can be years that we go through the perimenopause stage, whereas menopause itself is indicated more like the moon, like a date when your cycle starts or ends. And then 12 months from that date, you're sort of considered that you're menopausal, or entered that next phase and stage. So it's really interesting to think about, because hormones themselves, they're necessary, even though we often see them as this evil evil sort of
you only recognize the evil ones, it feels like.
Like the hormones do actually play an important role on development and reproduction, and all of those drives that help us with our adrenal glands and all sorts of stuff like that. And while I don't know the ins and outs of a lot of that, I'm definitely not medically minded. It's important to think about how those hormones are impacting things like our motivation for self-care, or ability to concentrate, or do physical exercise or all of those things like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So as you've been tracking along the years, have you noticed certain dips in your output at different times of month? Let's talk a little bit about that for a second.
I feel like I usually have like 2 really good weeks that like that's normal life. And then it's like hell week, like when you were in high school and you had to do hell week for sports. It was just the worst. That's what that reminds me of. It's like boot camp
Yeah,
for
yeah, like the beep test on the
um
yep.
and then there's just, the active week of you just being not wanting to do anything. And that's where my
Mm-hmm.
output dips big
Mm.
time. And I get such a funk. And it's like, okay, there's the period depression in full force. Let's not do anything and get up off the couch. No effort at all to put into absolutely anything. And ironically enough, this week when it happened was the 2 days that Declan insisted on going out for a walk. And so I had to give in. And I'm like pouty faced walking, but I did it.
Yep. Mm.
When
Yeah,
did
and I'm
you
more inclined to reach for sugar and starch and all of those snacky type things just to give me a burst. And I know it is a burst.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And then it's short lived, and then I feel like worse afterwards, like nearly every time.
I usually get a text, what can I bring home for you? And it's most times ice cream, please.
Yep. Yeah.
Drop off a pint of ice cream and I'll be happy.
Yeah. So self-care, right?
It really is. For me anyway. My unusual, not so unusual.
I just feel like there's so many factors that feed into that though, in those hormone fluctuations. So we're led to believe, I think, societally, from a systemic point of view, that we work and have the same output regularly, daily, weekly. Maybe we've got a weekly schedule where we have a day where we work more than we work others, due to daycare commitments or just life. And so many of us are trying to be consistent because consistency pays off a lot. I know that, you know that. We know that that's important as well. Yet when we can't maintain the same level that we could when we were in that 2-week bam, 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 when we're in a funk and we can't maintain that level, sometimes it's easy to fall into that head talk of like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? Like, especially if maybe you do have a period that's like come up unexpectedly, or you might plan out a little bit of your work time around
Yeah. So what are you putting
what you
in
know.
place to guard yourself from those lows?
Mm. Mm.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think that's where something like the sticky note time can really help, because you know that you've got certain ones that take a little bit more bandwidth than others, or a little bit more concentration than others. And when you're in that foggy, hormony type, hormony, oh, yes, where we like to moan a lot.
That's actually quite accurate.
Yeah, it's really, that was, yeah, complete accidental fluke, but sort of works. So where we like to moan a lot. What do you do to counteract that? Especially if people around you don't know always what's going on. They don't always know where your cycle's at. If
Right.
they're a work colleague or someone that you don't live with or see or have that sort of relationship with, there needs to be some adjustment, I think, there too.
Definitely is. And I agree with you. Sticking at time gives you that flexibility to taking the things that are going to be either more routine or more maintenance, things that you're not having to find the bandwidth to come up with a brand new idea or figure out your wording to get across without it being crisscrossed somewhere because you're just not all into what you're doing for the moment. I think even planning like, well, this week happened to have a lot of rain, so we had to stay inside for a lot of the time and no outside plays. So I had to come up with things where I could be like, I'm just sitting on the couch and you can play. So I even had to plan our time inside after work according to how I was feeling because the efforting was not there on those days.
Yeah. And that's when you need to find some more of those small wins, because so much of our concentration is driven in a way by dopamine and those wins that we can find. And so maybe a win is simply being able to have a cup of tea or sleeping in for 10 minutes or something like that, rather than needing the bigger ones in those times as well.
Yeah, I think we can sort of spend a little bit more of our bandwidth trying to focus on the work responsibilities we might have on those days where we find ourselves exhausted when we get out of those parts of our day and moving on, where sometimes the win is just that you didn't blow up afterwards at whatever might have gotten you to a point because your bandwidth was shot. And like that I'll take and, go to bed thankful that, I actually made it through the day without blowing up at somebody or that was guarded. I guarded everybody and still didn't exhaust or exert myself to a point of breakdown.
Yeah. But I mean, when we're thinking about hormones and self-care, it looks different, I think, depending on where we're peaking. Maybe our estrogen is peaking or those sort of things, where for me in those times I do just want to eat a whole block of chocolate or a tub of ice cream or something like that. But then at other times in the month, if I did that, it wouldn't actually be self-care. It would be more like, now I feel rotten. Now it's just actually set me on a sugar high and now I'm coming down, or there's more guilt maybe. Like, why do we feel less guilty about having ice cream on
when it makes us feel good when we're suffering?
Yep. Do you feel more guilty having ice cream when you haven't got the, I don't want to say excuse, but the reason of this is my period week and this is the week that I can have ice cream? Do you feel less guilty in that week than other weeks?
There's definitely been some that would have probably come up where I feel like I really shouldn't have eaten that, but I try to pace myself with how much I eat of my snacks so I don't get to that point where I had just enough to be like, okay, that didn't bring me over the edge and I don't feel crappy about it. But yeah, I get that.
I feel like we're not at the stage of being able to have ice cream safely in the house right now because Quinn gets into the freezer and then you find him in the kitchen with a spoon saying, yeah, but it's really yummy. Or the big kids are just like, I'll make you some ice cream, Mum, and myself some, and everybody else some.
Yeah, Declan pitches a fit when I say no to ice cream. I'm like, if you can figure out how to open it.
Yeah, well, Quinn can. He can open it.
Not there yet.
Yeah, and I think that puts a good lid on this conversation for now as well.
Oh, I knew one thing that I want to make that I think would be really great for us to look into or even talk about another time is how our food does match up in our cycle and exploring that a little bit more, because I know we've got some other conversations going about this, but there's a lot more we can have, and I'd love to see how we can sync that up.
Yep.
that and
For
our
sure.
fitness with it. So
Mm.
anyway, yes, you're very right, Linda. I think it's a great spot for us to conclude. So until next week.
We hope you can unstuck your muck. Bye for now.
Bye.